This is data visualization, data 205N. This is week 7, our final week in the course, and this is about data dashboards. Now, you've been exposed throughout this course from pretty early on with dashboards, but I wanted to kind of cover the sort of broad topic of data dashboards in this particular lecture. I always have trouble getting this thing started. So that's the agenda for this week at dashboards. We're going to spend some time in Tableau. We're going to learn some new and interesting things in Tableau besides the dashboards. Uh, so let me just start from the basics. What's a data dashboard? Well, a data dashboard is a visualization. It's a visualization tool, which we've learned a lot of different kinds. It usually contains multiple different visualizations. Let me pull this down here. Multiple different visualizations that give multiple outputs, and it may update in real time. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Uh, one of the one of the central things that's used in data dashboards all the time is what's what are called key performance indicators. And they are usually abbreviated KPIs. And key performance indicators, I've mentioned this a little bit, but they're usually it's a single number, and it's a single number that represents something that the organization really wants to pay attention to. So it's a measure of the success or the results of something that the organization really wants to be pay attention to. So at a high level, it might be what the sales were for the organization or what the profit was for the organization, something like that. But they could be department level also. So they could be things like, if it was a service desk, they could be things like number of inbound calls or time on the phone or something like that. So, excuse me, they can a KPI can include a whole bunch of things about the organization's financial position, things about the inventory on hand. So these are very operationally focused, sort of broad operationally focused KPIs. They could indicate the pending orders for parts or the progress on projects, maybe something like the status of accounts or the pending orders from customers or things like customer service metrics. And let's start with a visualization makeover of a dashboard. So this is the Transportation Improvement Board's Performance Management Dashboard. And there's lots of improvement. So if you've done a good job during this course of developing a visualization eye, you'll recognize there's lots of opportunities for improvement. Um, let's see, I think I have no, I don't. Let's see, I have, no. So these are a little hard to read, but the first is that the the section under TIB at a glance, there's not a context to tell what those are. What are those values? Are they year to date? Are they year to month? Are they, if assuming they're an annual uh uh number, are they calendar year, fiscal year? And then what's the meaning of the green and the gold and the white and red? Now, normally you know what green and red means, but what does gold mean? And what does white mean for that matter? So then the country map, sorry, the county map, uh, it's not clear at all what the colors mean over here. So do the colors mean the same thing on the left-hand side as the right-hand side? Do they mean something different? Okay, so let's do a little work on that and let's improve it. And the first thing is pretty simple. In the TIB at a glance, we're going to say what they are, their calendar year to date. And we're going to give a legend here that says the blue is meets expectation, the gold is trends to be monitored, and the red is needs attention. Now, your authors, I think, use too many words. So I wouldn't say needs to be monitored. I'd say something like needs attention or something like that. But there's too many words here. They're trying to be polite when in fact they should be much more direct about this. The use of blue and gold here, I'm not wild about. Gold's okay, and red's okay. Usually you use green to mean, green means go or good, and red means stop or bad, and yellow means something in between there. And so they could just use a really familiar analogy, which is a stoplight, and this would actually be more effective. But the point here is that they labeled what these different colors meant. Then in the counties, they labeled the counties, and again, they used colors to mean these things. Now, these colors, excuse me, this color coding is different than this color coding. They mean different things, and so they use different colors. And that was really an important thing. You go back to this one, they're using the same colors and they're meaning something different. Uh, if you look at this, the blue means that the projects are not at risk, the orange means it's at risk, and the gray means there's no current projects. So what they've done, they've used those colors, but this green and red and gray for that matter, gray is not used over here, but this green and red means something different than this green and red. Okay, so yeah, whenever you look at a visualization, you can often find there's often rooms for improvement, particularly if they haven't been through a course like this. Okay, so a couple principles of effective dashboards. A dashboard should present. Just by the way, the authors are very consistent in calling these data dashboards. Well, I'm not sure why they do that. Um, they're dashboards. And that's the shorthand I'm going to use. So I'm not going to call them data dashboard because it should be obvious that that's what we're showing. We're showing data. Um, anyway, the dashboard should present all the KPIs related to some aspect of the organization's operations on a single screen. So we're going to talk a little bit about who the intended audience is, but the point is to get this all in a single screen. You don't want your users scrolling through a dashboard. Now, a lot of times the designer of a dashboard has a huge screen and they design a dashboard for their huge screen, and then the users actually don't have that huge screen, and so they end up scrolling anyway. So it actually is useful to think about what the screen resolution is, what the size and screen resolution is of your users. An effective dashboard, you don't have to scroll through. A user doesn't have to scroll through. Another effective dashboard is to create multiple dashboards of related KPIs rather than having the user scroll vertically or horizontally for the information. The KPIs that you include should clearly and quickly convey the meaning to its users and be related to the decisions that the user makes. Now, that says that you know who the user is, you know what kind of decisions they're going to make, and you're designing a dashboard that includes KPIs for their decisions. So the KPIs that are interesting to them presumably are ones that they can influence decisions. They can make decisions that influence. And so the KPIs should really quickly and clearly convey the meaning. You've learned a lot in this course about the principles of effective data visualization, about the use of color, about the use of the pre-attentive attributes, excuse me, about all kinds of things about how you design effective visualizations. You should use those. All the components of the dashboard should adhere to that. And once again, you really want to use color judiciously to call attention to specific values or to differentiate between categorical values. The one caution I want to give you with dashboards is just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And when you start working in Tableau, you quickly learn that you can do all kinds of different graphs and different visualizations. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So you really should back up and say, who's my user? What's going to be most useful to them? And then design a dashboard around that, as opposed to saying, gee, what kind of interesting things can I can I visualize here? And let's put them up in a dashboard. I want to show you some examples. You've seen some of these before. I want to show you some more. So this is a dashboard examples from Tableau, and these, my opinion, have are not following the example of just because you can, you should. My opinion, some of these. So this is let's go take a look at it, see what it is. This is urban audit city fact sheets for 2019. Um, maybe this is way too much information. Maybe this works. Now I'm scrolling, you notice, so that's not a good thing. And in fact, well, I don't have a huge screen here, but I've got a pretty good resolution. Anyway, this is about coding degrees days, and so it has a name. These are climate indicators. It has a name, it has a description, and it has a value. So they're calling out KPIs. So presumably they're calling all of these KPIs, and here's their value, and here's their name, and here's their description. So nice work on that. Now presumably because it's highlighted, if I click that, something could happen in the chart. Not sure about that. Let's see. No, maybe not. Okay, and here's the climate situation. The cl- the do 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 the cooling degrees days, the min, the max, and the average, the forest fire danger, the min, the max, so on and so forth. Here's a section, so that's the observed and projected climate. Here's a section on land cover and exposure to hazards, the amount of green space, the sealed surfaces, the flood exposure, and the forest fires. Now, scrolling down, which I'm not a big fan of, the vulnerability. So socio socioeconomic and demographic characteristics, people 75 years or older. We don't have any data in this particular value. Children under 5% is 4.9, and that's below average. I presume that's something meaningful to somebody who's very interested in fact sheets about the 2019 Urban Adaptation Map Viewer. Now let's just look here. Oh, so that's in Spain. So I picked Spain. That's the only one that's selected. Uh, oh, I can select a city. So within Spain, I can select a city. So within Spain, let's pick Almira, and it gives me the same fact sheet for Almira. So this is pretty powerful. So this is showing a lot of data about individual cities, and all I have to do as a user is pick the city that I'm particularly interested in. It'd be very difficult using this to compare one city to another, but maybe that's not what I'm interested in. Maybe I'm interested in picking an individual city and seeing where it lands. Okay, so that's one example. Let's see what else we got. Not sure what this is. D100. Let's take a look at it. The Data FAM project showcase the amazing people who made up our Tableau Data FAM community. That doesn't sound particularly like a dashboard to me. Let's stick with the dashboard example. So let's go back uh, and take a look at another one. How about the City AQ viewer? So there are literally hundreds of these, maybe even thousands of these. So how clean is the air in my city? And this is based on the levels of fine particulate matter in air in cities 2019 to 2020. Here is the data that should be easily recognizable as a scatter diagram. And here's the meaning of the colors: good, moderate, poor, very poor. This is presumably, excuse me, Europe, obviously. Oh, and I can pick. So I could say I'm really only interested in Denmark. And so I get the same size map, although I can zoom in on it, but I see the spots where they have data points, and there's two reds. And by hovering over these, I can see that's Aalborg and Art Artbrus and Caberhaven. And here's the listing of those. So this is again really quite effective, right? I pick the country, and in this case, I've said all cities. I could say something with more cities, where we have more cities represented, maybe France. Okay, quite a few cities in France represented, so I could pick an individual city in France. Let's go one, I don't know France that well, but let's go one that I knew though. Paris. Okay, here's Paris. Paris is considered to have I'm sorry, moderate air qualities. There's four stations monitoring it, and it has 6.6 million people. So you get a sense of it. So this is definitely one where I'd say nice work. I didn't have to scroll through that. I could select what I wanted. Uh, didn't fall into the trap of just because they could, they sh just because they could, they should. This is really getting me just the facts. Think about it from a designer's perspective. What task does the designer intend for me to take on? And so my task is to understand at a city or a country level or a continent level, maybe, well, this isn't a whole continent, but city or a country level, how the air compares. And so if I go back to say all cities, my task might be to understand how France compares. Whoops. I zoomed in on that, which was not useful because it doesn't go. And I noticed that, oh, and it's even got these sorted. So it's got them sorted by good to bad. Okay, let's take a look at one more example. Now, Tableau is, of course, what we know and use. There are a lot of competitors to Tableau, one of which is ClickData, and they have, no surprise, a dashboard, a dashboard set of examples. So here's one for marketing. Let's take a look at the one for marketing. Let's look at all the ones for marketing. Um, let's take a look at this one, email marketing performance. So I want to know how well my email performed. Okay, this is good. I can fit this all on one screen. This is called marketing monthly email performance by category. So when it says monthly, presumably I update this once a month. There's 6 campaigns. There's 6 open campaigns. Here's the number of opens. So in email marketing, that's the number of people who received your email and opened it. Here's how many looked inside the email, saw a link and clicked on it. So in case you're not aware, when you are on the receiving end of an email campaign, they do lots of tracking. Um, Average response rate. So this says that 10% of the people presumably clicked, and then the total leads generated. And so they clicked on something. In this case, we got 101 people who filled out enough so that I could get some kind of contact information from them. So I got leads out of them. Here are the campaigns. Here's their name. And if I'm looking, I've got all selected. If I take that off, and for instance, I want to see maybe just this one. Uh, maybe just let me take all these off. See if this. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, so this is a little hard to read, which is a common problem with designers of dashboards. They want to cram a whole bunch of information into a really small space, so they make the type really small, which might work. It might not. It depends on the screen resolution of your users, the size of their screen, stuff like that. But presumably what this is doing is as I make changes to the campaign name, I'm getting different results. So when I pick this particular campaign, I haven't generated any leads from it. Now, this is a funnel chart that you've seen before. So this is how many emails we delivered. This is how many we had, how many opened. This is how many clicked. And I don't see we didn't generate any leads in this case. So here's the date and the time, et cetera, et cetera. So a pretty well done dashboard. So think about this. Who's interested in this? The guy on the head of customer service, probably not interested. VP of sales, probably not interested. Sales is very interested in marketing usually, but they're probably not very interested in this. the VP sales probably wants a higher level than this. The VP marketing, yeah, absolutely. The campaign manager, yeah, absolutely. So that's what this is directed for. That's what this is directed at, and it does a pretty good job of it. So it's very specific to the role that it's assuming about a user. So it's not, it's not writing this dashboard for the CEO because presumably the CEO is not interested in the details of marketing campaigns. It's much more interested in maybe a roll-up of these or something like that. Okay, so that was a couple examples. So you can follow these links. You can see lots more examples, which are, some of them are fun to take a look at. So why do you do a data dashboard? Well, you want to support some aspect of an organization's operations. You want to support them in decision making and strategic planning. So objectives of dashboards very often are tracking KPIs and monitoring progress, assessing attainment of goals and objectives. So if you have a particular goal, you want to put that on the dashboard. If you know that the customer service goal is to, have call wait time less than 5 minutes, if that's the goal, you could put call wait time 5 minutes. In fact, you could put a little kind of speedometer where you had the average call wait time, and you had a 5 in the goal area, and then you'd show where it was, where it was more, where it was less, that sort of thing. They're very often oriented around developing insight or enhancing insight. So getting a better understanding of how the organization is running. And again, they're particular to a functional area, very often particular to a functional area. They're very good at sharing information. So one of the things that we spend a lot of time on when we talk about business information systems is that everybody has a shared understanding that we're not using different data. And so these are very good for everybody getting on the same page as far as thinking about what we're doing. So if you have excuse me, if you have the marketing manager say, well, we generated, whatever it is, 1,000 leads last month, and the sales manager say we don't have enough leads, then you know those two need to reconcile. And so maybe that's not enough leads, but maybe it is, and maybe the sales manager isn't seeing them or something like that. So they're very good dashboards or a vehicle for sharing information, for measuring performance, obviously, and for forecasting and data exploration. So um, the context for a data dashboard uh, can be showing how a KPI varies over time. So very often I might put if I put a KPI out, let's say it was average wait time in a call center, I could say last month, this month. So I could get a sense of whether I'm making, forward progress or backward progress, particularly if there was a goal. So I might show three numbers, last month, this month, and goal. And I'd color code them so that, they were green if they were ahead of the KPI and red if they were behind. Now, if I'm talking about wait time, behind actually means more and ahead means less. So comparing the value of a KPI versus an organizational goal, uh, internally across divisions, departments, geographies of an organization. So I might have a data dashboard that has sales, and I'm looking for total sales. And so I put a KPI, which is total sales for a geography, as an example, sales in East, sales in West, something like that. Um, it might be customer focused. It might be across externally across customers. So it might be number of orders, or it might be something like satisfaction, customer satisfaction based on surveys. And you could even do it across competitors. So you could think of a data dashboard that talked about what competitors' moves were going on. Maybe you had a highly data intensive industry where you knew how many sales your competitors made versus you. If this is like the grocery business, a lot of times you know that. Um, so, so let's talk about some specific kinds of dashboards. So an investment dashboard, as you can guess from the title, they look at organization performance or portfolio of investments. So they might talk about the current price and the rate of return, the relative rate of risk on the portfolio and its components. They might talk about the current price and the recent rate of returns, and those kind of metrics for some portfolio under consideration. Maybe the share of the portfolio devoted to various industries or types of investments, or key financial data for the companies that are represented in the portfolio, in one that they're considering or one that they currently own. That's an investment dashboard. So this would be a financial services kind of firm or an investment firm. Manufacturing dashboards are about understanding a production process. And you might do that by a particular facility, by a product, by an individual, by a machine, by a shift, or a department. So again, depends on who your audience is and what you're trying to achieve. You would do a manufacturing dashboard about maybe output if you were looking for machines that were in need of repair, or you'd look at downtime or something like that. So things like the quantity produced, the units produced, the production speed, or the frequency of problems. That'd be machine downtime, returns, falling short of targets, etc. Marketing dashboards, uh, some that I'm most familiar with, they monitor sales and promotional efforts. Now, a lot of times organizations separate sales from marketing. Um, they go together. They're, partners in objectives, but very often marketing is about generating leads and sales is about closing those leads, making those business. So I might look at monitor sales and promotional efforts overall, or by product, service, individual, campaign, division, department, or customer. So I could look at quantity sold and delivered, the success rate or the proportion of successful sales calls, the sales revenue, and the product and services selling prices, advertising, and promotional expenditures. I could look at exposure in response to advertising and promotional efforts. I could look at contact with prospective customers or customer satisfaction metrics. This is just a small list of the kind of things that you can include. And so I go back to my earlier comment. You really want to think about the user and what's going to be most useful to them. HR dashboards. Uh, you see these pretty typically. So they're monitoring the performance of an organization's workforce, and it could be by an individual, it could be by division, it could be by department, or it could be by shift. And so we look at the number of employees and at labor effectiveness. We could look at churn. Churn is, turnover, rate of employee turnover. You could look at how long employees have been employed in that job. You could look at their performance, their satisfaction, their absenteeism. You could see how many you could indicate how many had participated in training. Maybe you set a KPI of all employees have, participated in, these five training programs, and reasons for leaving. So when employees leave, it's very typical to perform a exit interview. And so somebody sits down with them, usually with a kind of a checklist, and says, why are you leaving? Was it because of salary or your manager or the work or your commute or all kinds of things like that? Um, a lot of times support organizations will run technical support dashboards, and they're really intended to look at how the organization's support function is helping its technology users. So this could be by individual, could be by computer system, by division or department or location. And so it could be type of problem, response time, time to resolution. So response times is how long it takes me to pick up the phone, I'll say. Time to resolution is how long it takes me to actually get the user back up and running. Outstanding issues. So a lot of time, technical support organizations have these outstanding issues, these things that they would like to solve, but they can't solve them because maybe the technology is in the way, maybe they need to upgrade, that sort of thing. Persistent problems are a really useful one if you can get your hands on it, because they indicate where the organization should be investing in whatever it is, if it's new equipment or it's training or whatever it is to try to make those go away. Looking at downtime, how long a piece of equipment or a person is down because of technology. Looking at scheduled maintenance or software and hardware usage. And you can even go, as far as thinking about personal fitness and health dashboards. In fact, you might find something in this category for your term project. You might have. By now, hopefully it's done. Personal fitness, health dashboards, they monitor, aspects of an individual physical well-being. They could measure your pulse and your blood pressure, your body temperature, your weight and your BMI, how much exercise you get, number of steps, diet characteristics, or even blood sugar levels, things like that. I happen to work in several nonprofits, and we run donor dashboards. So donor dashboards are really trying to give the organization, so this is people in this function called development, which is really about fundraising, and usually the senior executive director insights into how the organization is doing in terms of donors, contributors, prospective donors, project campaigns. So number and dollar value of the donations that they've raised. Usually it's year to date. Number of contacts that have been made, number of expenditures, the conversion rate, the cash flow, any status of campaigns. So there are fundamentally two different kinds of dashboards. One is a static dashboard, which means it's behind the scenes, it's manually updated as new data and information becomes available. So when I talk about a monthly dashboard or something like that, usually that means that I update it once a month because I get new data from wherever I got my source data originally, and I pour it into the framework that I've developed for this dashboard. Now, that might be a small project or it might be a big job, but the point is that a static dashboard is relatively inexpensive and easy to development. It's helpful when the data change slowly. So a lot of times you don't really need to know a KPI, for example, except for you really don't need it any more frequently than an update once a month. And so they tend to be updated infrequently and can require a big substantial effort to update. Depends on how they were designed, but very often a static dashboard is a design kind of as a one-off. Oh, okay, I see what you want. I'll go do that. And then, the next month they come back and say, hey, could you update that? That happens more often than you would imagine. And that's when you might want to convert that over to a dynamic dashboard, or you might go into a dynamic dashboard right from the start. And dynamic dashboard means that it automatically updates as it receives and incorporates new and revised data. I talked a little bit about this in regards to Tableau. Tableau is um, it really has a lot of strengths in this area. I was going to say is design, but that might be too strong. But it has a lot of strengths in this area that we're not using in this course. But Tableau will connect to a database. We're just connecting it to CSV files, and the CSV files are static. So you could always overwrite that CSV file with a new version, and you could get an update. But it requires that you do something. A lot of what Tableau is about is connecting to a live database, a database that is updated continuously. And the bad news for a dynamic dashboard is it takes time to develop those. They're harder to develop because you have to think about the data changing all the time. But if you have data that you're exposing that change rapidly, then they're very useful. And a dynamic dashboard is usually updated quite frequently, but it requires very little effort to update it. In fact, it may be all completely automatic. So there's also this when we're talking about dashboards and taxonomy, there's also this idea about user interaction. So one is static versus dynamic. The other is the user interaction. So just understand, user interaction is not about static or dynamic. User interaction is how the user interacts with the database. And so user can't customize the display in a non-interactive dashboard. So there are plenty of dashboards that are really quite useful that the user doesn't get to choose anything. It's useful when there's not a lot of variance of the data displayed because you can fit it all on one screen and the user doesn't need to go elsewhere. Users can customize an interactive dashboard. And so that means that there's various widgets on the dashboard that let them change what they're seeing. They can do drill downs. So you saw examples of that where I picked a country or I picked a city. And so it provides more specific detailed information on a particular element. Now, you didn't actually see you didn't see that happening. All you saw was the whole display got refined to just that city. But what you might do is when they pick a particular city, in that example, you might show more detailed information about that individual city. Hierarchical filtering allows users to restrict data by selecting, values in nested lists. You can very often include a time interval widget that lets the user pick the time period that's going to be displayed, or you can do a whole bunch of customization tools to let them select and deselect and combine. And so these can get quite complex, which you only want to go there if your users are sophisticated enough to use it. You don't want to develop this, real complex, hard to use dashboard if your users aren't sophisticated enough to use it. Let me just mention some common mistakes in dashboard design. And the first is not beginning with the end in mind. Neglecting information that is really material to the objectives, focusing on information that's not material, or neglecting the actual users when you're designing the dashboard. So you really have to think about who's using this, not considering the environment. So think about where they're going to use it and what kind of computer they're going to access that on. It might be a phone. And so you would have a much different approach to a dashboard if you knew that users were accessing it on a phone. Now, a lot of times anymore, people access things from a desktop, a laptop, and a phone, and you have to have these responsive displays. Dashboards in generally don't lend themselves very well to phones because you have such a narrow view. You can do it, and if you know that's how users are going to look at it, then design for that. Failing to position charts and tables on the dashboard properly. So this all gets back to just basic design principles. If you make some BAN number and you put it way down in the right-hand corner, people just aren't going to see it. And if that's a really important number, you want to put that up in the upper left corner because that's how people read. They start in the upper left, at least in where we read right to left. They start in the upper left and they kind of go diagonally down the page. Using an ineffective type of graph for the data and its message. So this is an awful lot of what we spent time on this in this course is figuring out what an effective type of graph will be depending on the data and what you're trying to communicate to the user and the sophistication of the users. So another common mistake is neglecting principles of chart and table design. This is everything that we covered in this course. You learned a lot in this course about principles of chart and table design, pre-attentive attributes, things like that. And you don't want to ignore those. So those are part and parcel of the components of a dashboard. So creating a dashboard that's either too cluttered or too sparse. Now, it's pretty rare that I see dashboards that are too sparse, but I very often see them that are too cluttered. So I go back to my earlier statement. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. So there's a limit to how much information you should show in a dashboard. You might want to convert that into one or many dashboards where you progressively drill into more detailed information. But trying to show too much information on a dashboard is just a mistake. If you design an unattractive visual display, people aren't going to like it. I mean, it's human nature. We want to see beauty. And then not considering the organization's and the user's potential future needs. So this is about thinking about where they're going with this. And I can almost guarantee you that if a user says, I just need this quick and dirty thing to show me this, that they'll come back at some point in the future and they'll say, hey, I really liked what you did there. Could you, update it for this data? Or could you update it for this data and add, A, B, C to that? So in this chapter, You should have learned about how dashboards can help users understand, investigate data, and make better decisions. This is really about users making better decisions. So we learned all about how graphs direct users to making better decisions. Now we're putting those all together in a dashboard so they get kind of at a glance the things they need to make good decisions. We learned a lot of principles and common applications of various types of dashboards. We learned to consider the purpose of the dashboard and the needs of the dashboard user. I might move this up to the top because this is, maybe you didn't learn this at the top, but this is probably the most important nugget of information that I can give you about dashboards. Think about the user and display in the dashboard information that's important to the organization. Okay, I want to talk about infographics. Infographics were quite popular years ago, and they have, as a name, they have fallen out of favor. But as a use, they're used quite a bit. So here's an infographic of, so there's kind of this fine line between dashboard and infographic. Infographic is usually not interactive, is one of the big things. So here's a infographic about 3 years of the Russia-Ukraine war. And by the way, infographics usually don't rely much on the kind of visualizations that we've been doing, where we do graphs and charts. But there have been 1.1 million casualties in the Russia-Ukraine war. I don't see the date on this. There have been 70,000 Ukrainian soldiers killed. There have been 390,000 Ukrainian soldiers wounded, Ukrainian wounded, that doesn't say soldiers. And there have been 500,000, half a million Russians wounded, and 190,000 Russians killed. Pretty effective graph, in my opinion. And so they use this little icon that looks like a person, so they're personalizing this. They're using a dot graph, in this case, to help you understand the scale. Now, they could have drawn this in a pie chart, and in my opinion, it wouldn't have been near as effective. This is quite effective in talking about, we've got one section on the number killed, they have another section on the number wounded, and they have them color-coded according to killed or wounded. Let's see. Oh, so this is comparative conflicts. And so I've got Russia versus Afghanistan, the same kind of thing. Uh, so this is a quite effective visualization, I think. You wouldn't necessarily, uh, uh, well, you could draw this, but you wouldn't probably use any of the graphing tools that we've learned so far. You'd have a graphic artist go draw this for you. That's what makes it an infographic. This site, I think it's quite good. Information is beautiful. Let's go back to another one. How about the most beautiful news of the world? Oh, okay. So this is a heat map. And you notice the green is nature and apples, is nature and animals. The pink is health, and the purple is eco and climate. And they're using a kind of a form of a word cloud, kind of. They're using BANs for the title of what it means, and then they've got a percentage here. Again, pretty effective graph, I think. Okay, you can explore those. I think they're pretty useful. So, what do you have this week? Well, you've got a discussion due where you're going to post a video of you presenting your dashboard. And that's due on Thursday because Friday you need to respond to your classmates, and then we're done. We're done Friday. So you want to comment on two of your classmates by the end of day Friday. So you want to get your videos posted by Thursday, and on Friday you want to comment on a couple of those. There's a second lecture in this where we're going to explore some more techniques in Tableau. So I will see you next time.